It never begins with panic. It begins with confidence. Shops are full, banks are open, and the headlines insist everything is under control. But somewhere, quietly, the numbers stop making sense. A century ago, a woman in Berlin carried her life savings in a basket of cash. By the time she reached the store, the price of bread had tripled. In Rome, they melted silver coins to make cheaper ones. In Zimbabwe, trillion-dollar notes piled up in gutters. In Argentina, salaries rose faster than calendars could keep up. Every time, the same illusion. That money is permanent. Every time, the same ending. It isn't. Yet in every collapse, a few saw the pattern early. They didn't hoard. They converted. They turned paper into things the system couldn't erase. Land, metals, art, value that breathes. History remembers them not as prophets, but as survivors. And today, their pattern is visible again. So before we talk about what to buy, we must understand why value dies. This is empire economics, where history whispers warnings, and those who listen endure. Picture this scene. November 1923, Berlin. A woman wheels a massive cart overflowing with paper money through the streets, enough banknotes to fill a bathtub. But she's not heading to buy a mansion or a luxury car. She's desperately trying to purchase a single loaf of bread before the price doubles again by evening. Just hours later, children are seen using stacks of German marks as building blocks, the paper more valuable as kindling than currency. This isn't fiction. This is what happens when money dies. Throughout history, civilizations have faced moments when their currency transforms from trusted medium of exchange into worthless paper overnight. And in those crucial hours, those who understood what truly held value survived and even thrived, while millions of others watched their life savings evaporate like morning mist. The stories of these survivors weren't accidents. They were the result of recognizing patterns that repeat across centuries, patterns that most people never see until it's too late. Every empire, every nation, every monetary system eventually reaches a breaking point. The signs are always there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who know how to read them. From ancient Rome's silver coins to modern fiat currencies, the script follows the same devastating arc. Governments print more money to fund their expenses. Citizens notice prices rising, but assume it's temporary. Then suddenly, catastrophically, trust collapses and currency becomes confetti. But here's what the history books rarely tell you. In every single monetary collapse, certain items became more valuable than gold itself. These weren't luxury goods or exotic investments. They were simple, practical things that smart people quietly accumulated while everyone else trusted in paper promises. The survivors of Weimar Germany knew this secret. The people who weathered Zimbabwe's hyperinflation understood it. And today, as global debt reaches unprecedented levels and central banks create money at speeds that would make ancient emperors blush, these lessons have never been more relevant. What happened in Germany during the early 1920s should terrify anyone holding cash today. Following World War I, the German government faced impossible reparation payments and a collapsing economy. Their solution seemed logical: print more money to pay their bills. At first, the inflation was manageable, almost unnoticeable. In early 1922, 160 German marks could buy $1. Citizens grumbled about rising prices, but continued with their daily lives, trusting that their government would restore stability. But what happened next would change history forever. By November 1923, just 20 months later, it took 4.2 trillion marks to buy that same dollar. Prices weren't just rising, they were doubling every 2 days. Workers demanded to be paid twice daily because their morning wages couldn't buy lunch by afternoon. Restaurants stopped printing menus because prices changed faster than ink could dry. Banks closed their doors, not from runs on deposits, but because the cost of counting worthless money exceeded its value. During this chaos, something remarkable happened. While most Germans watched their savings disappear, a small group of people had prepared differently. They had converted their marks into tangible goods months earlier, recognizing the warning signs that others ignored. These weren't wealthy aristocrats with insider knowledge. They were ordinary citizens who understood a simple truth. When money fails, human needs remain constant. Food became the ultimate currency. Farmers found themselves wealthier than bankers as desperate city dwellers traded family heirlooms for sacks of grain. A single egg could buy what once cost hundreds of marks. Those who had stockpiled basic necessities discovered they possessed more real wealth than people holding millions in paper currency. The lesson was brutal but clear. In monetary collapse, the hierarchy of value inverts completely. The pattern repeated decades later in Zimbabwe, where monthly inflation reached an incomprehensible 79.6 billion% in 2008. Citizens watched as prices doubled every 24 hours, making long-term planning impossible. The government printed $100 trillion notes that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. But again, certain people had prepared. They had quietly accumulated items that retained value regardless of currency strength: tools, medicine, fuel, and especially food. These weren't random choices. Throughout every monetary crisis in recorded history, the same categories of goods maintain their value while paper money disintegrates. Human beings need to eat, stay healthy, and maintain their possessions regardless of economic conditions. A hammer remains useful whether you pay for it with gold coins or worthless paper. Medicine saves lives whether the economy is booming or collapsing. Food sustains families whether inflation is 2% or 2,000%. But understanding what to acquire is only half the equation. Timing matters enormously. The German citizens who converted their savings in early 1922 preserved their wealth. Those who waited until 1923 lost everything. The key lies in recognizing the warning signs before they become obvious to everyone else. When governments begin printing money to fund their operations, when debt levels reach unsustainable ratios, when trust in institutions starts to waver, these are the signals that history has taught us to watch for. Today, that same pattern is unfolding again, but most people can't see it because they've never studied the warning signs. Central banks across the developed world have created more money in the past 15 years than in the previous century combined. Government debt levels have reached ratios that historically preceded every major monetary crisis. Yet citizens continue placing faith in paper promises, just as Germans did in 1922, just as Zimbabweans did in the early 2000s. The mathematics are inescapable. When the United States government spends nearly $2 trillion more than it collects each year, when federal debt approaches 100% of the entire economy's output, when other nations begin questioning the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency, these aren't abstract numbers. They're the same warning signs that preceded every currency collapse in recorded history. The only difference is scale. This time, the entire global financial system is built on the same shaky foundation. But here's what makes this moment both dangerous and opportunity-filled. Unlike previous collapses that affected single nations or regions, today's interconnected world means the next monetary crisis will be global. That sounds terrifying, and it should. But it also means the lessons from history are more valuable than ever. Because while most people will be caught unprepared, those who understand these patterns can protect themselves and their families. The survivors of monetary collapse throughout history shared common strategies that transcend time and geography. They recognized that true wealth isn't measured in currency units, but in the ability to meet human needs regardless of economic conditions. They understood that when paper money fails, people still require the basics of survival and comfort. Most importantly, they acted on this knowledge before the crisis became obvious to everyone else. Food remains the most fundamental store of value during currency collapse. Not exotic superfood or gourmet ingredients, but basic staples that form the foundation of human nutrition. Rice, beans, canned vegetables, and preserved meats become more precious than gold when supply chains break down and prices spiral beyond reach. A 50-pound bag of rice that costs $30 today could feed a family for months when bread costs thousands of dollars per loaf. Water represents an even more critical concern that most people never consider until it's too late. Modern societies take clean drinking water for granted, but when economic systems collapse, water treatment facilities often fail or become unreliable. The ability to purify and store water becomes essential for survival. Simple items like water filters, purification tablets, and storage containers transform from convenience products into life-saving necessities. Medicine and basic healthcare supplies follow the same principle. When currency loses value, the cost of prescription medications and medical care can become prohibitive overnight. But common medications, first aid supplies, and basic medical equipment maintain their life-saving value regardless of economic conditions. A bottle of antibiotics or pain relievers that costs $20 today could become priceless when the same items cost thousands in devalued currency. History doesn't repeat, but if you ignore its lessons, it will crush you all the same. The survivors of every monetary collapse weren't the ones who trusted most in their government's promises. They were the ones who recognized the patterns first, who understood that true wealth lies not in paper, but in things that meet human needs regardless of what's printed on currency. Knowledge is the ultimate preparation. Understanding is the greatest protection. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. If you enjoy learning how history and money intertwine, subscribe to Empire Economics for more untold stories.